feel bad because I was like, all right, here we go. It's night one of the draft. I'm so freaking ready. I was ready to come out here and just be like, all of these crazy things happen. And while there were a couple of surprises that I can't wait to talk about, there weren't that many changes. And, I feel like the draft is always stronger on Raw because, of course, it's 3 hours. There's a bigger draft pool and there are more rounds, therefore, more selections. But I kind of felt like they just needed to. I just personally felt like a lot of the roster sort of stayed the same a little bit.
I mean, it's not a feeling. It's a matter of fact, right? The vast majority of the roster stayed the same. The only things that, like, notably off the top of my head, obviously the Carmelo Hayes thing, which led to the Cody Rhodes match. That was the first, like, oh, this is cool. This is interesting. Nia Jax switched. Did anybody else switch at all?
I have them down here. I'll tell you exactly. Okay, so let's get into this because I do want to break this down round by round. So let's break it down round by round just to make it a little bit spicy. We're gonna spice up the draft for you guys here. That's what we're gonna do today, Robin. So round one, SmackDown drafted Bianca Belair as their first pick, and the second surprise, which was the first surprise, excuse me, was their second pick in an NXT call-up, which was Carmelo Hayes. So let's start there. How did you feel about Bianca being the first person for SmackDown and then the Carmelo Hayes call-up?
Well, I like the Carmelo Hayes call-up because it was a surprise. Obviously, it's an elevation. Obviously, it also set up the main event of tonight's SmackDown. And then, of course, I like Bianca Belair being the top pick just from a gravitas standpoint. We've talked about this a lot and how big the women's division feels. And, for one of the women to be number one pick, Roman Reigns withdraws himself, which was a cool little wrinkle, I thought, before it started as well. But that is part of the emphasis and the, gravity that they have put on the women's division and what it means to be somebody like Bianca Belair.
Yeah, and just so that you guys know, it was announced a couple days in advance that the champions are remaining on the brand in which they already represent. So if some of you guys are wondering, like, why the heck wasn't it Bayley or somebody else? It's because the champions are remaining where they are. And also, I should say one more thing before we get into this, and that is that when the show started, Paul Heyman announced that Roman Reigns has withdrawn himself from the draft. And even with that being said, Robin, I thought, so the reason why is because apparently he's not going to be there for some time. So we don't know when he's coming back. But I mean, it kind of feels like, hey, we're all knowing he's going to SmackDown, given that the entire bloodline, except for like Jay, is on freaking SmackDown.
Well, yeah, and he's been such a staple of SmackDown. But I thought that was cool. Like, again, in the sense of if he's not going to be back, what's the point in drafting him? They're going to have to figure out this mix for a while now. I mean, a lot of big players have been taken off the board. If we're real, Roman's not there. Seth is still out injured, though he was drafted tonight. Obviously, The Rock is no longer around. Rhea Ripley is injured. That is a lot of star power that is taken down there. But, I think that SmackDown is just stronger. I've thought, we talked about this last week, and part of it's the 2 hours. Big part of it's the 2 hours. Maybe that gives me an inherent bias because I just like the way it moves better. But I also think the SmackDown roster is just stronger. Maybe it's because I already liked it better and they got all the same people. But, the Bloodline thing is interesting to me. They stay on SmackDown. LA Knight, I like to say his catchphrases around the house. He stays on SmackDown. You got Bianca, like you just mentioned, on SmackDown. I just feel like Randy Orton on SmackDown. I just feel like SmackDown is a lot stronger. The only negative was I was watching it with my oldest son, Raj, who, is now watching SmackDown religiously with me, especially because I'm doing this. He doesn't get the chance to see Raw, right? Like all the time because it ends later and it's a school night and whatnot. And he loves Jey Uso. So when Jey Uso went with the second pick, I glanced over at him and I could see the disappointment on his face. And I was like, you wanted him to go to SmackDown, didn't you?
I love that though, Robin, because like when you're a kid and you're watching the draft, basically whoever your favorite wrestler is, like that's the person where you're like, okay, I can't wait to see where this person goes because that's the show that, I'm going to be watching. And I remember that gutted. It's been such a long time since I've had that feeling. So, being a kid and remembering those feelings, that's freaking awesome that he still has that, that he can say, damn it, like he can actually have some emotion in this draft.
You know what? He plays the 2K game, and he does the GM mode a lot more than he does anything else. So there's a lot of drafting going on in our household. But he's very astute to the game too. It didn't wind up this way, but when Nia Jax came out and attacked Bailey, he was like fatal 4-way at Backlash. You know, so.
I love that. That is so freaking cute. I think there's more changes going on in his GM mode than they probably went on here. But I do want to spend some time on the Carmelo Hayes thing because first of all, like that was my pick that I thought was going to be like the biggest surprise. And so I was very happy that it happened right away, that Carmelo Hayes was called up during this. And the reason why, so there was a couple of things that I loved in this. So first of all, I love that the second he came out, there was whoop that trick chance, excuse me, because of his whole feud with Trick Williams. And I was like, hell yeah. When something that happens on NXT resonates and crosses over to the main roster, like that within itself is pretty huge. But the fact that he went out there and he challenged Cody freaking Rhodes, like what? The fact that that even happened and that we ended up getting this match, to me, kind of just showed that they really do have a lot of faith in Carmelo Hayes, you know? And the match itself was fine. Of course, Carmelo Hayes wasn't going to win, but it made things feel like a big deal.
Twofold. I mean, one, the position in which he was drafted. They could have drafted him and it would have been like, oh, okay, Carmelo Hayes is there. They drafted him right off the top of the thing, basically. And then, yeah, he comes out and has that little showdown with Cody that set up the main event, which was a nice touch, again, and a nice level of elevation, because he didn't just show up to SmackDown and challenge Karrion Kross. No offense to Karrion Kross. I liked his little promo tonight, but he was the first one I could pull up in my head as a reference point versus going up against, Cody Rhodes, who's now got the strap.
Yeah, man. Oh, and speaking of Jey Uso and your son being a fan, I'm going to be real with you guys. I was not expecting Jey Uso to be the first draft pick for Raw. I know Seth Rollins was, said right afterwards for Raw, but I'm like, I would have swapped those two because that's your former champion. And of course, I know that Seth Rollins is injured right now, but still, that is your former world heavyweight champion. Like, in my opinion, I would have drafted him like first. So for Jey Uso to be first, honestly, did catch me by surprise.
But you hear the crowd every time, right? I mean, Triple H had to acknowledge it. He's like, "Eat," that is a real thing. And with all those other people absent, and especially if Seth's out for a minute, and we don't know exactly what role he'll play when he comes back, you needed a babyface over there. With Cody now, SmackDown is stacked. SmackDown is stacked, and Jey Uso, this is his chance. Him and Jimmy kind of blew it at WrestleMania with their match. It did not live up to expectations. It was perhaps the worst match on the entire card. Probably was the worst match on the entire card, which sucks to say because these guys have been talking about how that's their dream forever, but it did not work out. His reaction, though, did. His reaction continues, and now he's got a chance. He's got a chance to be main event Jey Uso. Before we wind up with this Bloodline Collides thing that is definitely been foreshadowed and we've talked about and is coming at some point, and I think an eventual Usos reunion, this is going to be the opportunity for Jey Uso to see if he can take that ball into the end zone because they gave it to him.
Really, no, but you bring up a good point because that has been, the nickname that he's garnered, yet we haven't actually, while we've seen him in some main events, he hasn't had like that big crowning moment. So I feel like even them just announcing him as the first pick was, of course, a surprise, but it might just be foreshadowing the plans that they might have for him over on the Raw side of things, right? So I'm hoping that that's what it is, because if not, I was a little surprised by this. But that was the first round. The second round draft picks, we had SmackDown draft Randy as well as Nia Jax. So Nia Jax was one of the changes because she was over on Raw and now she's moving over to SmackDown. And then for Raw, we had Braun Breaker and Liv Morgan. So here's my big gripe on this, Robin, and I'm going to start with this right away here. My big gripe here was that freaking, what's his face? Nick Aldis. Nick Aldis kind of looks a little silly right now because over on SmackDown a couple months ago, weeks ago, whatever, they spent, so when was it? So Braun Breaker was on SmackDown from February 16th through April 26th. That is a total of 70 days. He only spent 70 days on the brand, which sounds longer, but when you think about it, there was only a couple of SmackDowns in there, of course. But with that being said, they spent weeks between Raw and SmackDown, both GMs arguing and begging and doing everything they could to get Braun Breaker onto their brand, Robin. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, if you worked this hard as a GM to get this guy on your brand, and not only that, but he's been squashing and killing everybody each and every single week, why the hell did you wait so long to draft them and keep them on your show? Like, if anybody would have made sense to stay on a show, it was Braun Breaker to SmackDown. So I kind of felt that they made SmackDown look a little dumb in this by not drafting Braun Breaker right away. But at the same time, at least it was a change. At least it was a surprise.
Braun Breaker needs to be on WWE Speed. Denise, I think you're probably paying a little bit more attention and evaluating these GMs with a bit of a finer tooth comb than most of the observers here. But I hear you, and there is a logical hole there. But I think going back to what I was saying before, that's part of the reason for that, because in my opinion, SmackDown has a lot of stars. So they're going to need to, if they want to elevate Braun Breaker, he could get lost in the shuffle over there. Versus on Raw, maybe that's where they're going to really work him into, because he hasn't had that program yet. He's just had those squash matches and the spears and the rahs and all that stuff. Maybe on Raw is when we'll see him actually get involved in something that makes you care beyond, he's cool to watch.
And he did have one of those squash matches today against Cedric Alexander. And this one was pretty cool because Cedric was like in the middle of he was ready to hit, to hit his move, right? He's like mid-air there. And then freaking Braun Breaker just comes in and spears the living life out of him. I thought that was really freaking cool. And we'll talk more about what kind of happened there, but that was sort of for the second round. That was the big one. Nia Jax also made her mark by attacking Bayley. We'll talk about the women's match later, but Nia Jax is also making her mark here too, already on the SmackDown roster.
I'm a fan of Nia Jax, and I thought that was a good pickup for them. Nia Jax, there's something to be said for just the physical presence, right? That's gone back to the history of professional wrestling, to the territory days when they were touring Andre the Giant around. And yeah, okay, acts like the great Khalil and Omos maybe haven't played perfectly at times, but there's a reason they have a certain level of spectacle, and Nia Jax brings that big physical presence. In fact, going back to Raw and the Battle Royal, I actually liked Becky Lynch winning it because I think it makes it more of a mountain for whoever to overcome, versus let's say Liv Morgan had won. It's not as much of a moment as if she beats Becky Lynch, and then you get Liv Morgan fans mad online, and you keep this thing going. But if it wasn't going to be Becky Lynch, I thought it should have been Nia Jax. So this then makes sense to me that she's coming over to SmackDown and going right for Bayley. And that title picture is all of a sudden very interesting because you've had this subplot going on with Naomi and Tiffany Stratton. Tiffany Stratton's obviously on the come up. Now you're throwing Nia Jax into the mix on a brand that Bianca Belair is already on. So that to me is pretty compelling.
I love that you brought up that point, the whole thing about Becky Lynch and Nia Jax, because again, you got to switch some people around and get some fresh programs because I know that there's probably still a lot more to do there with Liv Morgan, with Becky Lynch, and they're going to remain on the same brand, but I didn't want to see Becky Lynch and Nia Jax anymore, Robin. I was done with that program. I felt like, oh my God, it went from a match that we were waiting to see to a match that we saw way too much. So I was very happy to see that Nia Jax got drafted over to SmackDown because I'm like, okay, good. This is going to give us a break from that, especially given how similar Raw and SmackDown are both remaining. So let's go ahead and jump into round 3. So round 3, we saw SmackDown take LA Knight, Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, and Paul Heyman. And Raw, Ricochet and Sheamus. In this round, Sheamus was the only one that changed brands here. So there's some good stuff, and for the most part, at least we know the bloodline staying on SmackDown.
And that was one of the best parts of SmackDown again. To me, that whole sequence was really cool where you could get the Paul Heyman fear again. Solo Sikoa shows up. Tama Tonga's flanking him. Kevin Owens comes out. And it's later that they spill out, right, on that continuous shot down the ramp to keep that going before the Randy Orton pop out. And I'm thinking, okay, is it Kevin Owens, Randy Orton against Tama Tonga, and Solo Sikoa with the debut of Jacob Fatu to come in the midst of that match, which is, I think, what's going to happen. But the bloodline, I don't know how many different ways to say it. It remains just as, somehow it's still compelling. And Solo Sikoa he's killing it. He's killing it. Credit to Solo Sikoa. The gloves, the all black, the stare, the delivery. I didn't know he was capable of it. Maybe, did he just learn it? Was he waiting? Did he get his Jedi lessons at some point? His bloodline Jedi lessons? I don't know what happened, but he has answered the bell. And personally, especially because we're doing this, I'm very happy to see the bloodline remain on SmackDown.
Me too, because you need that. I feel like there are some people that just belong on a certain brand. Maybe it's because that's what we're used to, and we hate change sometimes. But truthfully, I feel like the bloodline is what SmackDown is. Like, SmackDown is the bloodline. The bloodline is SmackDown. And so those just feel too intertwined together that at this point, it would kind of be weird seeing it over on Raw. But let's be honest, if we did see the bloodline get drafted over to Raw, it would have been a huge surprise, because again, we connect SmackDown with the bloodline and the bloodline with SmackDown so freaking often. So anyways, I am happy to see Sheamus go over to Raw. I thought that one was good too. And then everything else is just the same, so there's not much else to add there. So let's go ahead and get into round 4. And for round 4, we saw SmackDown draft AJ Styles and Andrade, which was another change, Andrade. And then Raw had Chad Gable, Otis, Maxine, Akira Tozawa, and an NXT call-up in Kiana James. So let's get right to that. Kiana James. So there are a lot of women over on NXT. Obviously, I cover NXT on a weekly basis. People know that. And the NXT women's division, it's my absolute favorite, Robin. It's my favorite. I love the division. I love all the women in it. With that being said, I think if you would have asked me, name the top 3 girls that you would have thought when we're going to get called up in this draft, I would probably have named Roxanne Perez. I don't think, because I know champions stay as is, but I think that's just for Raw and SmackDown. So I do think they could have drafted Roxanne, but it would have been Roxanne, Lyra, maybe Fallon Henley. Kiana James probably wouldn't have been my top 3 in terms of the names of the girls to get drafted. But when she did get drafted, I was so happy, because I do feel like Kiana, the best thing about her is that from the very beginning, she has gotten her character down. Like, she got the character work so fast. I feel like there are some people that struggle with that, right? Like, there's some people that are just stronger on the wrestling side, and there are some people that are stronger on the character side, and the ones that are blessed are strong on both. But Kiana James is she's pretty good, but she is, to me, stronger on the character side. And I think she's a really good heel. Like, I buy her as a heel very easily. And I feel like that is going to be something that I want to see how that plays out over on the main roster, over on Raw. And so to see more of these women get called up on NXT, like, I want to see more. I hope more names get called up over on Raw, because I do think that they have so many to go with. So again, I wasn't expecting Kiana James, but I was pleasantly surprised when she got drafted.
You sound like a proud mom,
I am. I'm sort of like even doing, like, touching my chest, touching my heart.
Oh my dear God. But
wait till Roxanne gets called up. I might shed a little tear.
But that shows you that what they've done with NXT is really working, right? Because that was the impetus for it. That was the origin story for NXT, to be the developmental brand, to get you attached to the stars before they get called up to the main roster. And those were probably, the 2 picks that got noticed the most, other than Nia Jax being the one switch, but the NXT picks. So they're clearly trying to also establish it. I don't know if you want to say on equal footing, but on more footing than, the minor leagues, like on a step up above that, at least, the AAA level. And you can tell by your reaction. And obviously you cover this, closer than essentially anyone, maybe more closer than anyone on planet Earth. There's a case to be made. You cover this closer than anybody on planet Earth. And as far as your reaction, I think that's exactly what you're trying to get from the fan base in the broad sense. And then once you narrow in to or I guess not even the broad sense, in the more focused sense, and then in the broad sense, when she does get on that brand, you're trying to attract the new fans.
Yes. So with that being said, there were 16 picks today, 4 rounds. Out of the 16 picks, only 4 people changed brands, and then the 2 call-ups. So that was sort of where we're at if we're doing the math around here. So overall, I will say that I feel like this draft wasn't that strong, but of course, I'm expecting Raw to be a little bit more entertaining. So I hope it will be. But again, happy for Carmelo Hayes, happy for Kiana James. And Denisha Lane says new draft picks. Did they announce stuff on social media? Let me check really quickly, because if they did, we might as well get into that before we wrap things up. So let me just make sure here. Someone said more draft on X. Okay, here we go. Okay, we got them, guys. Here we go. So check this out. We have gotten Cedric Alexander and Nashante the Adonis are going over to SmackDown. We have Alba Fire and Isla Dawn drafted to Monday Night Raw. We have Baron Corbin has been drafted to SmackDown. He will not be on the same brand as his former buddy, Braun Breaker. So he's back on the main roster. And then Ivar will be remaining on Monday Night Raw. And then the OC are remaining on SmackDown. They will remain there. And Shayna Baszler will remain on Monday Night Raw. And Zoe Stark will also remain on Monday Night Raw. So there you go. Those were the last people that were eligible to be drafted, and they've officially been drafted. Honestly, the biggest surprise here is Baron Corbin going back to the main roster.
Yeah, he's been gone. Like absence makes the heart grow fonder. Not that people haven't been following on NXT, obviously, but I think there is a certain level of, oh, okay. He's back. Is there something new with him now? Is there a new twist? What are they going to do with him? What do they have planned with him? Because clearly, it's not. I wouldn't call it a demotion, but in a sense,
it definitely was. Yes, yeah, it definitely was.
It's a demotion, and which means they didn't have what they really wanted out of him, that juice that they really wanted out of him. But now he's coming back up, so that is going to be interesting to see, because he's got a lot of the elements to make it work. I mean, the thing with JBL didn't work.
That was the shits. That was the shits, Robin. It was like my least favorite thing ever.
You're so nice too. So for you to say that,
it was the shit. I felt so bad for Baron, and he's been given some like dog shit stuff. Okay,
dog food.
Literally, this poor guy. Like, I've gotten to the point where I feel bad for Baron Corbin. And over on the NXT side, things legitimately picked up for him. Like, him and Braun Breaker actually became this lovable duo of just bros who are, I don't know, broy. I don't even know how to describe that. Whatever. And so, like, Baron Corbin, like, this is the first time where we're not going to see Baron Corbin under what Vince McMahon wants Baron Corbin to be. So that is exciting. I hope that Baron Corbin finally gets an opportunity to be something cool on the main roster, instead of people going, Baron Corbin, damn, instant go away heat. Yeah, he doesn't deserve that.
And we've talked about this, but WWE has gotten most things right, in my opinion. In my opinion, they bat 90%. 90% of what they do has worked over the last couple of years. So they, the benefit of the doubt is not just given, it is earned. They have earned the benefit of the doubt, in my mind, at least the creative people and what they're doing on the episodic television and on the PLEs. And so with that, I have faith that whatever they have planned in Baron Corbin could click. I see somebody saying JG for life. Corbin can have a great feud with LA Knight. Like, that is the kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, I could see that happen.
So I got to tell you, I'm also excited about seeing Alba Fire and Isla Dawn over on the Raw side. I think that they can be a great tag team. They already got the characters down. I'm excited for them. And then everybody else is the same. So it is what it is.